welcome to our channel Preparation Pulse IAS. In this one, for the past like 4-5 days, we have started a series in which we have been daily communicating with you the total current affairs or the most important current affairs. Those are appearing in the newspapers. We are bringing it for you, so that's why you can connect it to the answer writing that you do in your GS mains, whether it is 1, 2, 3, 4 or essay papers. We would be selectively picking all those because we want you to utilize these kind of content in a very neat and clean manner. In today's lecture, we would be doing 6 topics. Number 1, Supreme Court, that will be hearing Election Commission selection plea process, that relates to GS2. Another second topic will be India's R&D, research and development. It belongs to GS3, you can utilize that. Bureaucrats and judges joining politics, GS2. Russia in India's defense, GS2 and 3. Russia's warning of nuclear attack, GS2. India's nuclear energy program through fast breeder reactor, GS3. These topics we will be discussing today. When we start, we are just getting to know that Supreme Court is supposed to hear plea to include Chief Justice of India on EC's selection panel. As we know, before the Supreme Court gave its judgment in Anup Baranwal versus Union of India in March 2023 regarding election commissioners selection process through a collegium system, in which it talked about that there should be a prime minister, leader of opposition and CJI in that particular collegium to select election commissioners or chief election commissioners. Parliament actually passed a law in the last session and it replaced the CJI's word through a union minister nominated by the Prime Minister in the selection process of the election commissioners. So now again it has been challenged into the Supreme Court, saying that number 1, whatever the process that Supreme Court gave, it has been relegated to dustbin, and Prime Minister, leader of opposition and union cabinet minister that is appointed by Prime Minister will then take care of election commissioners selection process. They say the plea actually is saying that because of this, the independence of the election commission can go for a toss. इलेक्शन कमीशन की जो इंडिपेंडेंस है वो हैम्पर हो सकती है, क्योंकि जब एग्जीक्यूटिव ही प्रिंसिपली इसको सेलेक्ट करेंगे तो वहाँ पे इसकी जो मतलब सिलेक्शन प्रोसेस है वो बायस्ड हो सकती है गवर्नमेंट के लिए. But the government also says that judiciary actually, because there is a separation of power doctrine, so government's view is that judiciary cannot sit into the appointment, and appointment earlier was done by executive and judiciary should not do any kind of thing in this. So an NGO that is called Association for Democratic Reforms, it has now approached the Supreme Court and Supreme Court has agreed to hear. As you also know that in the last current section of our channel only, maybe on 11th or 10th of March, we said that another Chief Election Commissioner Arun Goyal actually recently resigned. So Election Commission is now left with only one member, that is CEC, Chief Election Commissioners. 2 election commissioners have either resigned or retired in the span of 2-3 months. So now the election commission is only left with one member, and to conduct an election of the gravity of Lok Sabha, you require a particular strength, that is 3. As we know that since 1990s, the election commission is a multi-member body and has 3 members. So the Prime Minister, leader of opposition and one union cabinet minister that is appointed by the Prime Minister are supposed to select either 1 or 2 election commissioners. Those then can spearhead and give assistance to the Chief Election Commissioner to successfully hold the Lok Sabha election. And the plea in the Supreme Court is regarding that only. They say that if Union Cabinet Minister is a part and CGI has been removed, then judiciary should take into consideration this thing and should actually adjudicate on this manner. Again, I would like to tell you that in Anup Baranwal versus Union of India case in March 2023, a constitution bench headed by Justice K.M. Joseph ordered the Chief Election Commissioner and 2 election commissioners to be appointed by the President on the advice tendered by a committee that has the members of Prime Minister, leader of opposition and leader of single largest party or CJI. So they are demanding that this only should be followed, and the government's law that is mandating union cabinet minister instead of CJI should be removed with. So this is the first piece of news. Now second piece of news, that is regarding India's R&D funding. As you know, R&D is important because research and development is the one thing that actually creates a lot of good work for us. In a countries of the size of India, if we do not actually create good quality of jobs, then it can create some sort of issues regarding not only our economic health but also the employment numbers and the quality of employment that is generated. That's why India, to take advantage, and even actually we also know that world over there is a talent crisis. So if India promotes research and development, it can supply talent to the world on its own terms and costs, and it will not be facing the brain drain problem that it can do. Now you can say that, sir, this is contradictory, where India is on one hand trying to supply talent to other countries, and you are talking that there is a brain drain. But you see, supplying talent can happen to other countries on the basis of our terms and conditions, and the social security benefits would then be provided, so there will not be any kind of discrimination, and those people actually can always come back to India and contribute into their organizations whichever they were earlier. While in the brain drain, a person permanently actually settles there and does all the work for that host country, not the country from where he went away. So there is a basic difference. Now why actually R&D is important? You also know that in the interim budget that the government actually presented for 2024-2025, and the interim budget was presented because this election we are this particular year we are having the Lok Sabha elections. So the government which will be elected later on will then be presenting the full budget. So the announcement of interim budget with a corpus of 1 lakh crore rupees to bolster the research and innovation. How much amount? 1 lakh crore rupees in the interim budget has been set aside for bolstering the research and innovation ecosystem within our country. And what it does is, it has brought enthusiasm within scientific and research communities. The decision to rebrand slogans like Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, Jai Vigyan with Jai Kisan, Jai Vigyan, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, Jai Vigyan, and now Jai Anusandhan means the government is emphasizing that the country, if it is to progress, then Anusandhan means the research and development is necessary part of it, because we need to have the significance of research and innovation lies in economic growth, as I told you, in global competitiveness, technological advancement, and good quality of jobs. However, to fully realize the impact, we have to actually access the current research and development funding landscape that is in the country. When we look at the GDP per capita that is being spent and percentage of GDP that is being spent on R&D, India has a very less amount here. So we have right now the situation is the country is facing is, number one, lower R&D expenditure as a percentage of GDP. Number two, output in terms of patent grants is also lesser. PhD awarded numbers are also lesser, and the publication output is also lesser. So India actually with these kind of lags cannot become a research and development powerhouse. India's research and development is witnessing significant growth with a notable increase in gross expenditure on research and development from close to 6 lakh million rupees to now 12 lakh million rupees in the span of 12 years. So it has just doubled from rupees 6 lakh million to 12 lakh million. However, with research and development, still actually we have only 0.64% of the GDP that we spend on the research and development. And in that aspect, India actually falls behind major developed and emerging economies like China that spends close to 2.4%, Germany 3.1%, South Korea close to 4.8%, and United States 3.5%. Research output and innovation. So first of all, we need to increase this particular amount. So whenever the question comes about R&D, or in GS3 actually it will be asked that what are the India's ambitions in the research and development sector, or can India become a research and development powerhouse? you can mention and you can enrich your answers with this kind of data, that India's expenditure on India's current expenditure on R&D in GDP is somewhere around 0.64%, although it has increased and it has doubled in the last 12 years from 6 lakh million rupees to 12 lakh million rupees, but still a long way to go, because comparatively India not only spends lesser amount as a percentage of GDP as compared to other developed countries, but it also publishes lesser papers, lesser PhDs are awarded, and the patent grants are also not that significantly high. Till the time you control the patent process, you cannot have a particular manufacturing design and design and manufacturing both together at the same time. Despite the comparatively lower share of GDP dedicated to the R&D, India has emerged as a powerhouse in producing academic talent. As you know that India is producing academic talent to a good advantage, and that's why it wants to become a supply chain of talent across the globe. India's research output remains substantial, ranking third globally. When we talk about India's research output, it ranks third with over 300,000 publications in 2022 that highlights countries' robust research ecosystem and commitment to advance knowledge across diverse fields. India also secured 6th position globally with close to 31,000 patents granted in 2022. While, as we know that this figure is somewhere near, not near to US and China, but it is evolving and India has a greater chance ahead. When India we see that it is GERD is driven by government sector, including the central government that spends close to 44%, state government close to 7%, higher education systems 9%, and public sector industry close to 4%, with the private sector industry contributing only 36.4%. So in case you need to again emphasize this. Why? Because R&D can only increase when your private sector actually gives greater cooperation. So when we talk about the general expenditure on research and development, that is maintained by central government close to 44%, and as we know government's duty in the social infrastructure sector is so higher, in welfareism is so higher, that the amount that is left for research and development actually will be very lower, and that's why country is lagging behind with 0.6% of expenditure of the GDP. That's why we want this number from the private sector to go up from 36% to a wonderful maybe even 50%. Those powerhouses of where the developed countries are situated, there the private sector contributes a lot, and you must have seen the market value of those private companies because of this. You must have seen that AI chip industry and how Nvidia is growing faster. That's why we have to have collaboration between government, business enterprises, and high income network people and higher education institutions, so that we can have a positive impact of science, technology, and innovation on our economic growth and technological advancements. When we talk about the investment in research and development, with this sum 54% of is allocated to the government sector and predominantly utilized by four key scientific agencies. Which are four key scientific agencies? DRDO that utilizes close to 30%, Department of Space close to 19%, Indian Council for Agriculture Research 13%, and Department of Atomic Energy close to 11.5%. That's why a significant portion of R&D funding originates from the government, with considerable allocation towards autonomous R&D laboratories operated by the government. That is why required a private sector greater emphasis on research and development. We can even actually ask these private companies to collaborate with the government organizations, just like we are trying to do in the defense sector, where India is trying to become Atmanirbhar in or self-reliant in defense through collaboration of private sector with our government institutions. However, the contribution of private sector industries lag very behind. Approximately $6.2 billion, Indian business represent only 37%. Now the size of India's economy, $3.5 trillion, almost 3.5 to $3.7 trillion, and out of that only $6.2 billion is being spent by the private industry, and that is a very, very stark reminder that the country's private sector should be strengthened. The policy should be opened up for private sector, and even all those facilities actually regarding like patent application etc. should also be further strengthened or further simplified. Strengthened in the sense that further simplification should happen. So that's why private sector participation in this can further increase. Even research industry academia collaboration also can facilitate knowledge transfer, and it can even foster innovation. Higher education institutions also play a comparatively minor role in the R&D investment that only contribute 8.5% close to $1.5 billion. That's why if India is to become actually manufacturing powerhouse and research and development magnet, that's why we should also take care of this particular factor. So the impact of initiatives are India's technological and manufacturing aspirations now hinge on a transformative shift in R&D landscape. We can become Atmanirbhar if we can actually utilize this money wholesome. The legislative move will bolster scientific research nationwide. The act also, recent enactment that is done by government that regarding Anusandhan National Research Foundation ANRF Act. This Anusandhan and National Research Foundation Act actually underscores the government's dedication to catalyze research and innovation as a cornerstone of development. So whenever actually this topic comes, you should be giving a wonderful answer in all this particular manner. Now we would be talking about next topic, and that topic is judges and bureaucrats joining politics. Why this question? Because recently you must have seen a judge of the Calcutta High Court resigned, sent his resignation to the president, and as you know, High Court resignation can happen only when they apply to the president only, and he then joined the particular political party, and from that there are chances that he would be fighting an election. So a controversy has broken out, although this is not the first time that the judges have entered into the political domain. So what are the constitutional restrictions? You should only look what are the constitutional restrictions. Constitution works on the principles of checks and balances between various organs. As we know, the executive, the legislature and the judiciary all work through separation of power doctrine, and checks and balances are there. There are various independent bodies like Election Commission, Public Service Commission, Comptroller and Auditor General also. Those are required to perform their constitutional bodies without interference from the government. A judge of a high court has similar restrictions except for appearance before the Supreme Court or high courts. CAG and chairman also cannot take up any other employment with central and state governments. So there is basically a bar on these functionaries who are sitting at the constitutional posts to join government posts. Why? Because that is why they can hold their positions during this period without fear or favor to the government. But there is no constitutional restrictions on the political post. So whenever there is a constitutional question, then there are no restrictions placed by the constitution whether sitting bureaucrats can retire and join politics, if they can join or when they can join. There is no such thing actually. So there are no restrictions when it comes to joining political parties, contesting elections or being nominated to certain posts. These are notable instances of people who have held independent constitutional posts. There have been two Supreme Court judges in 1967 and 1983 who resigned from their posts to contest the presidential and parliamentary elections. Another Supreme Court judge joined a political party in Tamil Nadu and contested election 5 years after his retirement in 1999. Recently, we have also seen that a retired Chief Justice of India was nominated to the Rajya Sabha in 2020, that within 4 months of his retirement. But there are no restrictions. Again, I would tell you that there are no restrictions on bureaucrats or judges to join a particular political party. There are restrictions on joining government posts, as we have seen in Election Commission or judges or etc. But there are none on political party joining. So Election Commission, however, in 2012 had recommended to the Union government to provide for a cooling off period for the top bureaucrats after their retirement before they could join political parties and contesting elections. However, government actually rejected this particular advice based on the opinion of the Attorney General in 2012 that if we put restrictions and if we put cooling off period for the top bureaucrats to join politics, then this may not be in line with the constitutional provisions and democratic values, because democracy allows you to fight elections without fear or favor, and that's why constitutional was not designed in a manner which could have put or which could have actually given some sort of cooling off period to the bureaucrats or to the judges. That's why Attorney General said that this cannot be in line with the constitutional provisions and democratic principles. Even Supreme Court dismissed a writ petition in May 2022 that sought a direction from the top court to frame a legislation regarding cooling off periods or regarding retired bureaucrats joining politics. That's why there is no cooling off period requirement as of now. So whoever, whether judges or bureaucrats, are joining any political party is constitutionally and legally right. However, is cooling off period desirable? We can see it with the respect of ethics also, that one of the essential features of democracy is every citizen's right to contest election. You can mention in your answer. The Attorney General, while providing his opinion against the 2012 recommendation of Election Commission, had said that maintenance of independence and neutrality will be relevant. देखिए, जो इंडिपेंडेंस है या फिर जो न्यूट्रलिटी है किसी भी आदमी की, जब वो पोस्ट पे है तब वो डिजायर्ड है, जब तक वो पोस्ट पे रहे. लेकिन वंस ही हैज रिजायर्ड, देन इंडिपेंडेंस एंड न्यूट्रलिटी आर नॉट रिक्वायर्ड एज सजेस्टेड बाय अटॉर्नी जनरल in 2012. Attorney General had opined that such restrictions, actually if we put restrictions, such restrictions for commercial employment is based on intelligible. Acha, why there are rules at present which restrict a senior bureaucrat from joining a private job? You see, there is a restrictions that a particular bureaucrat cannot join a private job at least 1 year after he or she has retired from government service, and that is done because such restrictions on commercial deployment is based on intelligible differentia to avoid conflict of interest. So whenever actually that person is in the service in government, and if he is trying to secure a government job for himself before 1 year, then there can be conflict of interest that can arise. But if we place the same restrictions according to Attorney General on political parties, on the judges and bureaucrats joining political parties, then we are limiting the democratic choice. So that's why he opined against the restrictions. While the opinion of the Attorney General is based on sound legal principles, definitely, but it is equally imperative to remember the famous judicial quote that justice should not only be done but also should be seen to be done. एक फेमस कोट है ना कि भाई जस्टिस जो है वो न केवल किया जाना चाहिए लेकिन ऐसा भी प्रतीत होना चाहिए कि जस्टिस किया जा रहा है. इसलिए कहा गया है कि भाई चाहे वो जजेस हों, चाहे वो इंडिपेंडेंट कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल अथॉरिटीज़ हों, चाहे सीनियर ब्यूरोक्रेट्स हों, वो जब अपनी ऑफिशियल ड्यूटीज़ जो हैं वो डिस्चार्ज करते हैं तो एटलीस्ट उनको जब ये पोस्ट अगर वो ज्वाइन करते हैं तो फिर जनता के मन में जो है कहीं ना कहीं संदेह पैदा होता है. इसलिए एटलीस्ट कुछ ना कुछ कूलिंग पीरियड होना चाहिए जिसकी वजह से जस्टिस जो है शुड नॉट ओनली बी डन बट शुड ऑल्सो नीड सीन टू बी डन. इसलिए ये एक तरीके से इट विल इंस्टिल अ कॉन्फिडेंस अमंग द पब्लिक एट लार्ज एंड विल नेगेट एनी अदर एलिगेशन ऑफ क्विड प्रो को. हम अब नेक्स्ट टॉपिक पे चलते हैं, वो है रशिया का डोमिनेंस इंडियाज आर्म्स इंपोर्ट्स में. आपने देखा होगा एक सिप्री की रिपोर्ट आई थी. सिप्री जो है वो स्टॉकहोम बेस्ड मतलब स्वीडन का एक थिंक टैंक है और वो जो है वो रिपोर्ट देता है रिगार्डिंग आर्म्स कंट्रोल. तो इसने कहा था कि इंडिया ने जो है थोड़े दिनों से अपने जो आर्म्स के जो बारे में बात हो रही थी कि भाई इंडिया का आर्म्स जो है वो घट गया होगा इंपोर्ट, लेकिन वो अभी घटा नहीं है और उसमें अभी भी बढ़ोतरी हुई है. हालांकि उसने एक चीज़ ये बताई कि जो रशिया का जो शेयर हुआ करता था इंडियन आर्म्स इंपोर्ट्स में वो 76% 2019-13 से 36% आ गया है 2019-23 में. और ये इसलिए भी हुआ है क्योंकि फ्रांस जिसका केवल नेग्लिजिबल पार्ट था, करीबन 0.9% शेयर था हमारे हमारे इंपोर्ट्स में, वो करीबन बढ़ करके अब इतना ज़्यादा हो गया है कि भाई मतलब वो रशिया के इसको चैलेंज कर रहा है. ये अब बढ़ करके करीबन 33% हो गया है. फिलहाल अगर यूएसए का भी शेयर देखें तो वो 8% से बढ़ करके करीबन 13% हो गया है हमारे जो इंपोर्ट्स हैं उसमें. तो आपको इससे रिलेटेड ये बातें अभी फिलहाल ध्यान रखनी है. बढ़ते हैं हम नेक्स्ट टॉपिक पे.